Out at Manama's Pearl Roundabout. They've been there since last month, but their stand so far has won them only minor concessions. Zainab Al-Khawaja is a protest organizer in Manama, and she says the people there want the US to stop supporting the Bahraini government.
We want America not to get involved. We can overthrow this regime. We can. The people of Bahrain is strong, just like the people of Egypt. All we want is for America not to support the dictatorship in Bahrain, because people here, they're going to have to sacrifice so much more if the Americans decide to support the regime.
The ruler of Oman, Sultan Qaboos, has ordered a major cabinet reshuffle after weeks of anti-government protests in that strategic Gulf state. Oman Television, the state TV, reporting that the Sultan named several new ministers in key posts, including the person who oversees the economy. It appears to be the latest in a string of concessions aimed at appeasing the protests, the people there demanding jobs and political reforms. We're shutting up no more. That's the message of hundreds of journalists. They've been trying to press home in Jordan. Encouraged by protests in the region, they're asking the government to stop silencing them. The Minister of Media even joined the rally himself. Nisreen Al-Shamaili has more.
Stop government censorship and put an end to the meddling of Jordan's intelligence service in the media. Those were the demands made by hundreds of Jordanian journalists protesting in Amman. They say the imposed self-censorship and conservative editorial policies have only produced a pitiable and frightened local media. Every one of these journalists has a story to tell about being censored, from their filmed material being confiscated, to their TV channels shut down, to being issued travel bans.
There are red lines. Journalists are not allowed to cross them in Jordan. Both internal and foreign affairs fall within these red lines. Your journalistic and personal freedoms can be impinged upon, and your material confiscated if you speak about these red lines.
The government spokesperson attended the sit-in and agreed with the protesters' demands.
It is impossible to achieve any kind of reforms, political or economic, unless we start by granting the media more freedoms.
The intelligence service hasn't only been criticized for limiting press freedoms, but it has also been blamed for rigging several elections. That's why most Jordanians now believe that the only way forward in carrying out political reforms is by loosening the grip of the intelligence service on the nation's affairs.
I think that the security establishment also should stick to its own business, which is taking care of security matters and not interfere in questions of public affairs and the media and appointing or firing journalists and editors-in-chief.
The distrust of the country's intelligence service runs deep. Many Jordanians are convinced its agents blatantly rigged the 2007 parliamentary election to curb the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Jordanian intelligence's cooperation with America's CIA in Afghanistan is another controversial subject. With so many Jordanians demanding wholesale political change, it appears the future role of the country's security service could also change if their demands are met. Nisreen Al-Shamaili, AlJazeera, Amman.
Let's go back and take a look in more detail at what's been happening in Egypt, which not so very long ago was the focus of so much attention. Well, there's a new look cabinet there. Let's talk to Sama Shahata, Professor of Egyptian and Arab Politics at Georgetown University in the United States. Good to have you on the program. Now, the new Prime Minister, Essam Sharaf, he's pretty popular with the protesters. Why is that?
He's popular for a couple of reasons. He was popular before the revolution because he was known to some degree. He has served as Minister of Transportation for a short period of time, but had a falling out with the cabinet and the old Prime Minister. And then he's popular for another immediate reason, which is he participated to some extent in the protests. He was with a march of professors from Cairo University during the revolution that went all the way down to Tahrir Square. So he has participated in the movement that led to the ouster of the former president, and that, also gives him a great deal of credibility.
Let's talk about two key appointments. First of all, the new Interior Minister. The Interior Minister responsible for the security forces, which were largely loathed in Egypt before the revolution. So what kind of person has he put in charge here?
Well, the key thing is that he's put in charge a new person, and that it's him who has chosen him as opposed to the former president. You'll remember that the Interior Ministry post, as well as many other posts, were newly appointed people by former President Mubarak. And of course, there was a great deal of suspicion and skepticism around them. Now, Issam Sharaf and the Supreme Military Council have appointed many new ministers, including key posts, as you mentioned, the Interior Ministry and also the Foreign Ministry and a number of others, people who aren't terribly well known, but that's a good thing in a way, in the sense that they're not tainted by a connection to the previous regime.
And is he very much his own man? I mean, we remember, as you told us, that he was out on the streets with the protesters. But when you say he and the Supreme Military Council have appointed these people, who actually makes the decisions? Who's in charge?
Sure. I think that for many cabinet posts, he's in charge. But I think, and my skepticism is that there are some ministers, for example, the Minister of Military Industries, who's a leftover of the old regime, who's a former general, who's not liked. And he has retained his post, curiously enough. And I think that that's probably a result of the Supreme Military Council saying, you're not going to touch that ministry. He's one of ours, and that's kind of a red line. So by and large, I think he's got a great deal of discretion. But we can't forget that the Supreme Military Council is still in charge. They are still acting as the executive branch, the president of this country. That's the case when it comes to security matters. It's the case when it comes to state security. As you've seen over the last couple of days, there have been these taking over the state security ministries and so on. So they're still in charge to a large extent.
Professor Shahata, thank you very much, talking to us from Cairo. International forces have made progress in securing some parts of Afghanistan and in training Afghan forces to take over long-term security. At least that's the claim. But as Sue Turton discovered, many civilians in Kandahar province still live in fear of the Taliban.
Driving down Highway 1 in what many Americans call the heart of darkness. The Taliban was born in the district of Jirai, west of Kandahar city. It's here that some of those extra 30,000 US troops were sent to stop its momentum.
When we moved into this area, it was completely under Taliban control.
When the 1st Squadron 75th Cavalry Regiment arrived here last summer, the whole area south of Fob Wilson was Taliban territory. But over the winter, they've made the major roads more secure and set up small outposts dotted across this hostile terrain, including Pashmel south and Sablagay to the southeast.
You have to set a permanent presence to show that the people that you're going to stay, because the people here are still fence-sitting.
And out on patrol from the Sablagay outpost, people are clearly nervous about speaking out.
Is there anything else you would like to tell me about the Taliban?
Don't ask us these kinds of questions. It will bring trouble for us in the future. We cannot be against you. We cannot be against the Taliban. You make trouble for me in the future.
If we talk about Taliban, they'll cut our hair.